Good morning. I'm just checking that I can actually be heard right now. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today and also to be the first speaker at your conference. That was an unexpected privilege for me today. I don't know if you're familiar with the brand L'Oreal and their brand slogan. I love it because you're worth it. Let me ask you a question, and it's a question perhaps you've answered many times before, and that's, why did you join Toastmasters? How have you personally benefited from being a Toastmaster? I'm not asking you to answer those questions right now, but at least to think about the answers to those questions, because they're important in us determining our worth or our value in all of this. As some of you have heard on some club visits I've made in your district recently, I joined Toastmasters, or I went to my first Toastmasters meeting when my home club was only 6 weeks old. So I feel like I've been there since the beginning of the club, even though I just missed that first part. I went, my reason, to meet new people. And I experienced this professionally run meeting, which began and ended on time, where people laughed a lot and they seemed to learn a lot. And I knew immediately that I wanted to join. 15 years later, and I'm still a proud member of my home club. For me, a club is that community of learners that are focused on the mission of the club. I won't put your knowledge to the test of the club mission, but it's really important because it's the driver for the how we do what we do, and sometimes for what we do. A lot has changed in those 15 years, it would be fair to say, and I don't know how long you've been a member, but I am confident that you have seen change in your time in Toastmasters. Sometimes we think of Toastmasters as changing very slowly, and other times we think of that change as happening perhaps more quickly than we would like. And of course, we've seen this biggest single change, I think, in all of our history in the last 12 to 15 months in the form of the global pandemic. That high, sudden impact change that was outside our control in so many ways. Really, all that we could do was deal with it rather than stop it happening. So what changed with the pandemic? Well, I think a number of things changed, and here are some of the things that I thought of. You perhaps can think of more, and maybe some that are more personal to you. I think for most people in the world, our priorities shifted. Suddenly, we were much more concerned about our safety and our health than maybe we had been before. I know I chose to go shopping at the grocery store at a different time of day and different day of the week so that I wouldn't meet so many people. More concerned about our family. My family live in Scotland, I'm in Germany. My family called me much more often in the last year than maybe they've done in the last 10 years, checking that I'm still okay. And also priorities around work. For some people, it became a real high priority to find work or to hold on to the work that they had. Also, I think predictability changed. It became very hard to plan for the future. We had no idea what would happen, how things would spread or work out. People planning weddings. I had 2 friends last year who waited until they were in their 50s to marry, and both of them had to cancel weddings and didn't get to have the big day that they wanted with all their friends and family. And of course, I don't know what it's like where you are, but here our rules are constantly changing. So this week we've had a week of no nighttime curfew, and tonight it starts again for we don't know how many days. So really hard to predict and plan for the future. Also, our choices changed. For some of us, perhaps our income levels changed, usually not for the better. And therefore, we didn't have so much free income to spend on the things that otherwise we would like to. Or maybe we had to compete in the job market. And also the options for how you spend your free time have changed. And for us in Toastmasters are options around how we meet. Here, we haven't been able to meet in person for most of the last year. And when we could meet in person, the restrictions were so great that we would have needed an enormous venue just to gather the club for one meeting, and probably couldn't have afforded to pay for the venue. And I think the fourth thing that's changed have been our ways of working. So many more people working from home. I worked from home before the pandemic. My husband didn't, but he does now. And I've discovered just how noisy he is at work. And so we've had to make some changes in how we use the space at home. We learned the reality of Zoom fatigue, and our social circle shrank. Within a very short time of the pandemic being declared, 85% of our Toastmasters clubs were already online, dramatically changing how we connect. Despite all of those changes, there were some things that didn't change. And we sometimes forget that because the world feels so very different for all of us. What didn't change is that as people, we are built to need connection. We need people to care for and people to care for us, people to interact with in some way. And that's probably why my family call me so much these days. In fact, with some friends, we even have dinner on Zoom. That's an interesting experience. If you've never done it, I can only recommend it, in the absence of being able to meet in person. Secondly, what didn't change is that as people, we focus on skills. We need to learn new skills to survive, perhaps to get customers for our business, and for some of us to get jobs, perhaps having to interview online in a way that we've not done before. And many of us became masters of Zoom. Certainly a skill that has grown in all of our clubs, I would say, out of necessity, not usually has been out of choice. And maybe also skills around how we market our clubs. How do we market in an online world? Maybe we've become more familiar with working on social media because that's an easier way to connect for us. And a third thing that I think hasn't changed with the pandemic is that as people, we focus on results or outcomes. And I'm not talking here just about hard-driven numbers, but an outcome could be staying healthy. It could be achieving a personal goal, perhaps a Toastmasters goal that you've set. Because when we focus on results and outcomes, that's what brings us opportunities. If we stay healthier, we can do more. If we achieve things, we might have new opportunities at work or in the broader facet of our life. So in the face of all of this change in the world, I guess there's a question that sometimes comes up, and that's the question, is Toastmasters still relevant today? You can consider that question, though, in a different way and ask yourself, is it still relevant for people to grow their communication and leadership skills? And is it still relevant for people to grow their self-confidence? When we look at all of those changes that have happened around us and the opportunities that are springing up, I would say there is no better time to learn skills and to develop yourself. The platform on which we meet has changed. We don't shake hands anymore, but the opportunities for learning that Toastmasters provides are all still there. We just do them in a different way. And so I believe there has never been a better time to be a Toastmaster. Things change so quickly sometimes, but yet in Toastmasters, we're being given this opportunity right now to engage in learning curves. I mentioned earlier about becoming masters of Zoom. And in many, many clubs and districts, we've moved beyond the, I know how to switch on and log in and speak and be silent, be seen and not be seen. And we have people doing all kinds of amazing things when groups are gathering in how they use this tool. Leading online meetings is a key skill for many of us, whether those are fully online or hybrid meetings, or also leading a remote team, being part of a remote team. I led a remote team for a long time. When I was a district leader, I met with my team only 5 times in the whole year because we were countries apart. And nowadays, many other people are having that opportunity. Perhaps that's a skill you might even think that you need, or you know someone who does. I mentioned earlier thinking about why we joined Toastmasters, and why, perhaps also thinking about why we stay in Toastmasters. My reason was to meet people and have fun. And quickly I realized how much I love seeing people develop and how I like to support them in their development. And even in these tough times, I can still do that. I've just had to learn to do it in a different way. What about you? As we think about making the most of our membership in Toastmasters and thinking about the opportunities that there are for us, I want to share with you today my top 5 tips for having a thriving club in these times. And the first of those is to be ready and relevant. And actually, coincidentally, I think the man in that picture reminds me a lot of RJ. It wasn't deliberate, RJ, honestly. When my club first went online, my home club, we were convinced it would only be a few weeks. So we actually left all of our belongings in our meeting room, which is in a school, and they're still there. They're all locked up in the cupboard. And so when we went on to Zoom, we just did the bare minimum. We thought, this is enough. This allows us to connect. It allows people still to give speeches and evaluations. And after a few meetings, we began to realize that we were approaching this with the attitude of making do, rather than thinking, how do we do our best in this environment? And however much we wished it would all go back, it hasn't. We're still online. And our regular meeting isn't temporary. And when we embrace that idea, then we're ready to create great meetings and worthwhile experiences. So what could we do to be ready and relevant that I would share with you? We reviewed our agenda. We put in breaks so that people don't get so tired. We're in the online environment, so we use the digital backgrounds, the club ribbons from TI and the timers and so on to help us. They're all tools that give a bit of a professional experience or appearance to the meeting. And we trained up people to support us with Zoom. We found out how to market in that environment. We also did some really practical things, like we have breakout rooms in the middle of our meeting. When we have a short break, we have our guest lounge, that's what we call it, where some of the club officers go and meet with the guests and chat about the club. And at the end of the meeting, we have the speech evaluator pairs, each have a room to themselves, where they can give that added value to evaluations. My second tip for you is to execute with excellence. Excellence is one of our core values in Toastmasters, and it's how we want to approach all our meetings, by making it the best possible experience for everyone. Because no one gets up in the morning and looks in the mirror and thinks, I want to have a terrible day today and I want to attend only bad meetings. We actually want to come to something good. And it's our meeting, it's our club. So let's have a strong and prepared start. Keep your meeting in its time frame. Have breaks if you need them. Think about what you do with cameras and microphones. I'm a member of one club where our culture is always to have our cameras on. And it makes such a difference to the energy of the meeting. I've guested with clubs where they actually ask people to have their microphones open. That can sometimes make for an interesting experience when you get to know what's happening in everyone's home or wherever they are. And develop people to hold those tech host or chat master roles to support your meeting and experiment with what could make it even greater. My third tip is to mind your members. I said I wouldn't test you on the club mission, but just as a reminder, the club mission is about providing a supportive and positive learning experience in which members are empowered to develop communication and leadership skills, resulting in greater self-confidence and personal growth. It says nothing about the meeting format. What it does say is that everything we do is aimed at keeping all of our members growing and developing so that they may experience the benefits of the Toastmasters programme. We have to take care of each other. The best way I know to keep your members engaged is to keep in contact with them. Give them what they need and want. We all came to Toastmasters for our own reason, and the club is the place where that reason can be met. So sometimes we check in at meetings, don't we? We check out, how are you? We survey members about their needs in different environments. I mentioned before about using breakout rooms to support the member, to give them that extra value. And then thinking about orientation sessions for our new members. Perhaps doing a group of new members together so they get to know each other better, or all of the new members in an area or a division. I actually know of one district that are doing it at district level to help support the clubs. And then my fourth tip for you is to value variety. Creativity brings energy to a meeting and keeps it fresh. So switch up your agenda, add music during breaks. Think about all the different styles of table topics, the things you can bring onto the screen that would be harder to do if you're in person, and all those online tools that encourage engagement, things like polls and Mentimeter and so many different tools that are out there. Think about themes in your meeting. Don't let them overwhelm your meeting. But how would you do it? I visited a meeting recently where the theme was India, and everyone coming to the meeting was given a virtual background of the Taj Mahal. I went to another meeting where their theme was the colour red. And I didn't know that when I went to that meeting. And red is one of my favourite colours. You will often see me wear red. And of course, that was the one night when I didn't wear red and everyone else did. Make your meetings an event. Connect with other clubs. This morning, my club met and we had a speakathon meeting with another club that's about 200 miles away from us. But we gathered together and we had about 35 people on the call and we had a great time together. Invite guests from other places. This is the time when you can have speakers from anywhere. And then my final tip to you is remember that we're Toastmasters together. Although we have a self-paced and self-directed learning program in Toastmasters, it's still a team effort in so many ways. So let's be together. Encourage mentors to phone their proteges so that they feel supported and noticed. Build in social time in meeting time when we just need more connection and informal chat with each other. So opening rooms early, or a WhatsApp group to share news or photographs, not just arrangements. And celebrate achievements. Celebrate every kind of achievement you can find to celebrate and feel good about the things that you're doing. The world may have changed dramatically in the last year. People's circumstances and priorities may have changed, but your Toastmasters Club still has a lot to offer to each and every person who comes. I would encourage us to make our clubs a place where you are ready to share your personal story of transformation through Toastmasters. Remember the questions I asked earlier? Why did you come? What skills did you learn? Those are important, and gather them so that you can share that story, because stories warm the heart and stir the head and connect people. We should listen to each other and show that we care. Try out new ideas and invite people to come. We learn together. And as we learn together, that's what opens up new worlds for us. And overall, be kind to yourself. These are tough times for so many people. We need to be kind to ourselves as well as to each other. And why should we do all of that? Because you're worth it. We have some time left, and I'd like to open the floor for any questions or comments in the remainder of our time together.
I have a question.
Yes, Dawn.
I really enjoyed hearing your stories about things that were happening in other clubs that you've visited. And I was wondering if you could share something else from those visits, something that really stands out as special or unique. I love what I've heard so far, and I would love to hear more ideas.
So one of the clubs I visited was a club in the Netherlands. And I found it really interesting. They had really struggled to get online. So they'd had about a month of not seeing each other. And the first thing they did when they arrived was they said, let's just ask, how is everybody and what's happening? And they had about 45 members in this club online, but they just took the time to listen to each other's stories of what was happening. And then they got into their program. Then at the end of the meeting, they played music, so it felt a bit like a party. Then they opened breakout rooms and they assigned everyone to breakout rooms, but you had the possibility to move. And there was a topic per breakout room for discussion. And I loved that because it felt so much like the mix and mingle of a party where you could just have all different kinds of ideas going on. And that's one of the meetings that really sticks in my mind because it felt so fresh to have that experience. And, you know, you weren't obliged to stay at the end. You could leave if you had to go or wanted to go. But for those who could stay and chose to stay, it really was a great experience of just meeting people. Because I think that's what we really miss. You know, we can do the meeting part. It's the informal part that I think a lot of people struggle with. You know, the conversation you'd have when you pick up coffee at the table or you're just waiting for a meeting to start and whoever comes to sit near you. Those kind of things, I think, are what we miss most. Or maybe it's just me. That's certainly what I miss most.
Morag, for District 8, I want to commend certainly Don Tucker and Tom Kasha and many others on the efforts that we have been putting out to try to have engaging things like our TLI and this conference and things like that online. My question is, how do we see Toastmasters evolving and adapting? Because as we go back to a little bit more normal, it's not going to be the same. There's going to be work from home, I think, is going to become the norm, or at least your 2 or 3 days a week working at home. And we're going to need to be more and more tech savvy and more capable of having really effective virtual meetings. How do we see Toastmasters evolving to meet those needs?
I think we will see the trend moving much more towards hybrid meetings, because I think there will be people who want to meet. And especially when you work from home all of the time. I love that at the moment, my journey to my club meeting takes me less than 20 seconds usually to get from where I am to club. And the thought of then, oh, I'm going to have to travel again. It's not a big distance, but I'm going to have to travel again. But I think the longer that people are working in isolation, working from home, the more desire there will be to go back to meetings. And so I can see that hybrid meetings are going to be our way forward. And I think at the moment, Toastmasters has been putting out a lot of information on things you have to think about, helping to prepare clubs as they think about that. My home club actually had a discussion just this week about becoming a hybrid meeting, because during the course of this pandemic, our chartering president, who now lives in California, has rejoined the club. And so what happens longer term? And we decided that we would make a commitment to her and others who are at a distance from us now. And I think it's part of a challenge that we'll face, because people have loved traveling all over the world to visit clubs. And now they're going to have to think about, what do we do with our members? How do we take care of our members if they still want to be part of that connection? So I think that's going to be part of it. And I think, it's a challenge for districts to think about training as they think about training leaders. Of course, you want to train on the roles that we have, the leadership roles we have, but I think districts will also need to start training on some of those perhaps more advanced skills available to people. And perhaps Toastmasters International might also look at some of that. But I think the organisation certainly is working towards providing good information for people, for clubs, to help make the right decisions for them.
Morag, we need to keep moving, guys. I hate to cut you off, but I really enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much for being here. Let's give another round of applause for Morag for showing up today and kicking off our meeting the way we did. Please.
Thank you very much.
And I'd like to, with that, let me go ahead and trying to keep on track, because my ringmaster, Dawn, is kind of cracking the whip and making sure I'm staying on track, because I tend to get a little lengthy in my conversation.